So who's really in charge now in the U.S.? Because it seems like we were saying that we don't want to see a larger conflict in the Middle East, but it just seems to be happening. Biden says one thing, then another thing happens automatically. Israel just
Yeah.
says, "Oh, we're doing our own thing." Actually, I have a clip I'd like to play for you that I think would
Okay.
fit well. You probably have seen this already. Let's try it. Okay,
Okay.
here we go.
Just before Iran fired on Israel, I spoke with Lebanon's Foreign Minister Abdullah Abu Habib, who's in Washington to meet with American officials, and he joined us for his first interview since the latest escalations. Foreign Minister, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Things have reached a major crisis in your country since we last spoke. And I want to ask you, you are in the United States right now. You know that several of the administration officials agree with Israel's, ground incursion into your country. What do you make of that as you're in Washington trying to get support for a ceasefire?
Well, they also agreed on the Biden Macron statement that calls for a ceasefire, and that calls also the implementation for 21 days ceasefire, and then Mr. Hochstein would go to Lebanon and negotiate a ceasefire. Okay, and they told us that Mr. Netanyahu agreed on this, and so we also got the agreement of Hezbollah on that. And you know what happened since then? That was the day we saw you in New York.
I know, and you were talking about going into the Security Council for this ceasefire, and barely 24 hours later, the head of Hezbollah was assassinated. Are you saying Hassan Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire just moments before he was assassinated?
He agreed, yes, yes. We agreed completely. Lebanon agreed to ceasefire, but consulting with the Hezbollah, the speaker, Mr. Berri, consulted with Hezbollah, and we informed the Americans and the French that what happened. And they told us that Mr. Netanyahu also agreed on the statement that was issued by both presidents.
Okay, well, as you know, Mr. Netanyahu was also in New York at the time, and he actually said publicly the IDF must fight on. And then he ordered the assassination and the targeting of that headquarters, which killed Nasrallah. So, given all of that, I mean, who do you have any faith in if the strongest country in the world, the United States, seems to have no or very little influence after publicly saying that there would be a ceasefire?
I don't think we have an alternative.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wild, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
So there was a ceasefire agreement that the U.S. And apparently France as well were part of, and said that Netanyahu also agreed to the ceasefire, 21-day ceasefire. And then literally within 24 hours, they're both at the UN. This is PBS, if anybody's just listening, didn't see. That then within 24 hours, they assassinated right after they're saying that a ceasefire agreement was reached. Like, it's such a slap in the face. If there's any doubt that Israel is not trying to provoke a war, then this should settle it. And how does the U.S. take that? Like she said, that the U.S. seems to have no influence. That we gave our word, and a lot of people are saying that this is one of the reasons Nasrallah was assassinated, is because that there was a ceasefire agreement, so he wasn't in hiding as much, because they had the word of America and Europe, and they say Netanyahu as well. But literally, then Netanyahu, he has himself recorded a videotapes himself calling in the assassination to level these buildings in Beirut.
Right.
It's like he wants people to see that I'm here at the UN, and we just say that there's a ceasefire deal, and you can see me. I'm here at the UN, and I tell people that Israel wants peace, and this is what I'm doing.
Right.
It's such a slap in the face to America. So I just who's in charge? Do you think America knew that this was going to happen? That America really thought there was a ceasefire? I mean,
well, I think it's probably the U.S. did what it did okay, in this case, what it did earlier in connection with Hamas. Remember when there were negotiations, ceasefire negotiations, there was at one point when the U.S. was claiming that Israel had agreed to. And they maintained that pretense for quite a while, but it was Netanyahu was going to say, "Oh no, we're not doing that." It was clear that it was some sort of, I don't know, it's ridiculous strategy or just sort of desperate desperation on the part of the U.S. negotiating team. So, well, let's just say that that the Israelis will do it, and we can rope them in, and if we say that the Israelis agree to it, then the other side will, and then we'll go back to Israel and what. But Israel had clearly never agreed to it. And Netanyahu never had any intention, as we pointed out many times. And I think something similar may have happened in this case. They didn't really get any assurance from Israel. And if they had, any sort of, if they were being at all honest or clear-eyed, they knew that they were not going to get it from Israel. But they just hoped against hope. Okay, we'll say that Israel did. Then we can say we have this agreement, and then maybe Israel really will go along with it. This is not the first time it's happened. I just want to point out too, it's just a further example, that it's clear, from this recent news and from, many earlier incidents that Israel has decided on a course of military conquest. They are not interested in any kind of diplomatic solution. When there were ceasefire negotiations ongoing over Gaza, they assassinated the chief negotiator, right? And now here, there's Dr. Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire. They assassinated him. And I also need to point out, it sounds like, we just killed this one man with a bullet. But of course, we took out at least 4 buildings, some say 6 buildings. We're talking about hundreds of civilians that died with him, along with members of his staff and members of his family. I think his daughter died with him too. Let's never forget that. This is a country that is just it's clear as day, has no interest in any sort of peaceful agreement with any country. Again, there have been attempts, obviously by Iran, by Hamas, and here by Hezbollah. Israel has run roughshod over all of them. In each case, has chosen the path of military escalation, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in now.
It just still always blows my mind just how impotent and just neutered the United States is. That we can't. Our reputation is completely destroyed. We have no ability for diplomacy because we're just showing that we will say one thing and then it's clearly a lie. We have no control. We have no influence.
Right.
Like that's insane. That's insane. Like that you saying that our strategy was just to hope. Like we never really got Israel's word. Like we could get Israel's word if we say, "Hey, Israel, if you don't do this, then we're going to not give you any weapons." So,
right. That's exactly. It's just Netanyahu who's learned. He can just completely ignore him. He just blows them off. It's happened again and again and again, and it's amazing how these countries. I have to say, I'm very sympathetic with Pezeshkian, the new Iranian president. He's been excoriated for being a fool or whatever, but he tried the path of peace. Again, I think he was quite naive. And now he's woken up to what's happened. But it's just like even after all that had happened to Iran, they were still hoping, it's hope against hope that we can work something out.
Right, that maybe that the U.S., we can talk with the U.S. and the U.S. is able to exert its influence over Israel because the U.S. does have the power, does have the ability to stop this. We've talked about this many times. So it just seems like I can see where possession's coming from. If anybody's dealing with it, it's like, okay, well, the U.S. is reasonable and they're the great power. They're the ones that are really in charge. So we make that agreement with them, then it should be their word, it should be their bond. But clearly it isn't at all. Yeah. And that's unbelievable. And it's just so damaging to the United States on a global stage.
Everybody sees it, like especially the countries in the region. You say, like, who's going to, the U.S. credibility is just nil right now. The U.S. reputation is in tatters. Um, this is a diplomatic disaster.
Nobody's going to trust us again, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't. We've shown again and again. I mean, we can go back long, as far as we want back, how the U.S. has gone, hasn't held up its word, has gone back against its deals and its promises, in Ukraine as well with the Minsk agreements and all these. But it's so blatant now. It's so in your face here that it's unbelievable that we just take it. We just go along with like, oh, well, Israel, he's just, he's crazy, but. Right.
Yeah, it's a combination of, I think clearly there are people in the U.S. administration that do not like what Israel's doing. We got that report from, about Lloyd Austin shouting on the phone. And you hear apparently there's real intense animosity now between Biden and Netanyahu. But, there are two things going on. That's just like, even the ones that, I think Biden, no matter what, would be supporting Israel. He personally hates Netanyahu, but he's just a zealous, a fervent Zionist, and he'll continue to supply the arms to the very end. Others, I think, really would like to change their policy, but they're afraid. They know the power of the Israel lobby in the U.S. They know what it means, and so they just shut up. They're quiet, and they do what they're told. But then also you do have Netanyahu does have his supporters, quite a few of them, within the U.S. administration, and you do. Especially at the current time where there's nobody really in charge, a lot of them I'm sure, are just personally, like Paul Blinken, just reassuring Netanyahu, just, don't worry, what Biden says, it doesn't matter, or what, if Lloyd Austin's angry, it doesn't matter, we've got your back, nothing's changed here.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very fascinating. I mean, it's an insane state of affairs with the United States that there doesn't seem to be anybody in charge. So you have this question of like, can you even deal with the U.S. at all? Because there really isn't anybody to talk to. And if you talk to one person, they may not want to do that, but apparently there are other forces in the government that just do what they want to do. So, yeah, I mean, is it fair to say that the U.S. right now, it's there's just different factions within the U.S. that are each kind of pursuing their own interests, and even those interests may conflict. For an example, there was this report. Well, I mean, obviously the ceasefire deal with Lebanon. There's a report that that we're trying to de-escalate the situation. Tell Israel, don't go into Lebanon. We have the ceasefire. But then I also heard a report that we secretly told Israel, you need to go in now. This is the time to move in. Have you heard that as well?
So I've heard that. Yeah. Again, who knows what's true? I mean, these things are probably leaked by intelligence agencies with they have their motives. But it's possible that both are true, as you're saying. It's just, again, we have a rudderless government, and there are factions. Like, everybody they're virtually all Zionists. But some of them are, let's say, are
pragmatic.
Yeah, it's more pragmatic Zionists, as opposed to the wild-eyed Zionists that just want to go for an all-out war right now, who really do want a war with Iran, and they've always been there, right? So, they might both be true, both of those reports.
That's crazy. So you think that's the current state of the U.S. government? We're rudderless. There are individual different factions. The State Department wants to do this. The neocon group wants to do this. The Pentagon wants to do this. And nobody's making any real decisions. And they all kind of just do what they want to do.
Yeah. In the end, though, it almost doesn't matter, because when it comes to Israel, it's Netanyahu who calls the shots. He gets his angry calls, he gets his warnings or whatever, but he ignores them, and he goes ahead. And no matter what, as we see again and again, we saw it with Lloyd Austin, the U.S. falls in line. Even if they didn't want him to do it, if he does it, they make some statement, we stand behind Israel, every time. And then they send him another shipment of bombs.
So would it be fair to say that the real commander-in-chief of the United States military is Netanyahu? It's not Biden?
Well, you could almost say that. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but I mean, he's not commander-in-chief. He's not actually, instructing, or ordering deployments or anything like that. That would make him a commander-in-chief. But he's basically setting policy for us and strategy, let's say at that level. Yeah, it's actually, he's driving the strategy, and not the U.S.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. So do you think then, if after everything that's done and it's clear that, I showed you the video clip, that Netanyahu is just escalating, is wanting to drag the U.S. into war, and apparently Biden has no ability to say no. So do you think then that when there is a retaliation on Iran that Israel has promised, that'll be done potentially with the United States, that the United States is going to strike Iran or help Israel in some capacity?
Yeah, I think the administration's already stated that they will not participate in an attack. Now, I guess you can take that with a grain of salt. I don't think if they participate, it will be kind of indirectly or behind the scenes, like maybe providing them with satellite data. I suspect they're doing that. Maybe refueling services, which is, that is clearly participation, but they're not going to be. I don't see any like U.S. aircraft, U.S. missiles being fired at Iran, not at this stage. I mean, but again, they'll take when it seems almost inevitable at this point, Iran launches its next attack. Again, the U.S. will play an air defense role, but it seems like from this first attack that's rather ineffective, and they have even fewer missiles to use this time.
Right, we'd have to, wait another 10 years to build up enough interceptors to survive the next barrage. It's a crazy state of affairs. I just can't believe that the U.S. is just has no ability, and that we are just drifting into this war.
Yeah,
It's
like some kind of bad dream. It's hard to believe, but this is where we are.
You think that maybe at some point somebody's going to wake up, or Biden's going to wake up and say, hey, we can't do this, that he's just been
Well, the thing is, even if he all of a sudden magically got his cognitive powers back, he would still be, I don't think there would be any change, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, there would be maybe a little less chaos, but he's going to support them. I mean, he might, again, make the occasional angry phone call, but it's in a gesture of disapproval. But that's, he's supported them all along, and he will continue to support him. And it looks like it doesn't matter if it's Harris or Trump, that support will continue with the next administration.